Welcome to Cluster Fudge, where we dive deep into the stories and myths we tell ourselves. Today we're tackling a big question. Is America the heroic world police, the defender of freedom and democracy, or is it something else? Maybe a bully with a dangerous hero complex? This episode isn't about easy answers. It's about looking honestly at history, politics, and culture to understand America's real global role. All right, let's rewind and dig into how this whole American hero complex got started. If we want to understand America's role today, acting like the world's self-appointed savior, we have to start at the beginning, with the founding myths and ideologies that shaped the nation's identity. Right from the early days, America wasn't just about land or independence. It was about a mission, a destiny. The Puritan settlers came over not just to build new homes, but to create a city upon a hill, a shining example of virtue, freedom, and godliness for the world to see. This idea of being a model society, a beacon of hope and morality, took deep root. Fast forward to the 19th century, and you have the ideology of manifest destiny, the belief that the US was divinely ordained to expand across the continent. This wasn't just about land, it was about spreading civilization, democracy, and progress. Manifest destiny was a heroic narrative. America as the savior, bringing light to the wilderness, civilizing native peoples and forging a new society. The White Knight in the 20th century, World War II and the Cold War. The 20th century solidified the hero narrative on a global scale. World War II was America's coming out party as the defender of democracy against fascism. The US portrayed itself as the White Knight, rescuing Europe and the world from tyranny. After the war, during the Cold War, that narrative morphed into fighting communism. America as the global policeman, standing between freedom and totalitarianism. American exceptionalism, the moral mandate. Underpinning all of this is American exceptionalism, the belief that America is fundamentally different, better, and morally superior. This belief frames America as not just a country, but as a moral force, with a special responsibility to lead and intervene. This exceptionalism often blurs the line between confidence and arrogance, making intervention feel not only justified, but necessary. Interventionism as heroism. This mindset laid the groundwork for decades of interventionist foreign policy. Whether Korea, Vietnam, or later conflicts, America's actions were often framed as heroic missions to save people from oppression, spread democracy, or protect the free world. This framing helped build public support, but also made questioning these missions harder. The cultural reinforcement. Movies, literature, and media fed the hero complex. Think of the countless war films portraying American soldiers as brave saviors, or political rhetoric calling the US the last best hope for mankind. This narrative became woven into the national identity, a story Americans tell themselves and others about who they are. But there's a downside. A hero complex can blind us to nuance, complexity, and consequences of our actions. It can lead to overreach, unintended harm, and a lack of accountability. As we'll explore, sometimes the hero becomes the bully, and the rescue becomes an imposition. So that's the birth of the American hero complex, from Puritan roots to manifest destiny, from World War II savior to Cold War enforcer. It's a powerful story, but it's also a dangerous one because it shapes how America acts in the world, often without enough self-reflection. In the next segment, we'll see what happens when that hero act crosses the line into bullying. Stay with me. All right, now that we understand the birth of America's hero complex, the story of the shining savior, let's talk about what happens when that hero act stops feeling heroic and starts looking more like bullying. Because here's the thing, power without humility quickly turns into coercion. The line between helping and hurting can get dangerously thin. The thin line, intervention or coercion. Intervention in theory sounds noble, stepping in to stop injustice, protect the vulnerable, or promote democracy. But when does it cross the line? When does help become harm? It's often about power dynamics and consent. Is the intervention requested or welcomed by the people it affects? Are there hidden agendas or self-interest driving the actions? Who really benefits? The local population or the intervening power? If the answer leans toward imposition and self-interest, you're looking at bullying, not heroism. Historical examples of American bullying. Let's unpack some well-documented cases where America's hero narrative masked coercive actions. Iran, 1953. The CIA helped orchestrate a coup to overthrow democratically elected Prime Minister Mohammad Mossadegh after he nationalized oil. The motive? Protect Western oil interests and curb Soviet influence. The result? Decades of autocratic rule, resentment, and instability. Chile, 1973. The US supported the military coup against socialist President Salvador Allende, fearing leftist influence in Latin America. This led to Pinochet's brutal dictatorship, human rights abuses, and long-term trauma. These aren't isolated incidents. They reveal a pattern where heroism became a cover for geopolitical control. The Iraq War, the hero complex on full display, and backlash. Fast forward to 2003 and the Iraq invasion. The official narrative: liberate Iraqis from Saddam Hussein's tyranny, bring democracy, and fight terrorism. But the war was based on false premises, weapons of mass destruction that didn't exist. The invasion caused massive civilian casualties, destabilized the region, and contributed to the rise of ISIS. Millions of people suffered, and the heroic liberator image was shattered globally. The empire of bases and coercive presence. Today, the US maintains around 800 military bases in over 70 countries. This presence is often justified as promoting security and stability, but it's also a massive projection of power. Local populations sometimes see these bases as symbols of occupation and control, sparking protests and anti-American sentiment. Is this global policing or global bullying? The answer depends on who you ask. The human cost: civilians caught in the crossfire. It's critical to remember the human cost. Wars and sanctions often hit civilians hardest. Families displaced, economies shattered, trauma passed through generations. Economic sanctions meant to pressure governments can cause shortages of medicine and food, harming ordinary people rather than leaders. Is this justice or collective punishment? Global perceptions, polls, and public opinion. How does the world see America? Polls from Pew Research and other organizations show declining favorable views in the Middle East, Latin America, and parts of Europe and Asia. Common perception of the US as arrogant, self-interested, and heavy-handed. While some still admire American innovation and culture, many question its foreign policies and motives. America's bully image is a major obstacle for diplomacy and global cooperation. The psychological angle, the savior complex versus narcissism. Psychologists describe a savior complex as a compulsive desire to save others, often ignoring their autonomy and needs. This can morph into a kind of narcissism where the hero's self-image outweighs the actual impact on those they help. The result? Repeated mistakes, justification of harmful policies, and an unwillingness to listen or adapt. So when we zoom out, we see a pattern. America's hero complex fuels interventions that often disregard local voices and consequences. What starts as a mission to help can easily become a mission to control, turning the hero into a bully. In the next segment, we'll look at how America's cultural influence plays into this story, how soft power shapes perceptions, sometimes masking hard power's harms. Stay with me. All right, we've talked about the overt forms of American power: boots on the ground, regime changes, and the ever-expanding web of military bases. But now let's look at a subtler, and in some ways even more powerful form of influence: soft power. Unlike hard power, which uses coercion or force, soft power is about persuasion, attraction, and seduction. And when it comes to soft power, few countries do it like America. Let's start with what's arguably the most recognizable American export: Hollywood. From Marvel superheroes to rom-coms to Netflix originals, American media dominates global screens. These stories often carry more than just entertainment. They subtly promote values: individualism, consumerism, freedom as branding, militarized heroism. Think about how often American soldiers or intelligence agents are portrayed as the ultimate protectors. Even when flawed, they're framed as necessary. Hollywood becomes not just a storyteller, but a myth maker, reinforcing the image of America as the brave, complex hero on the world stage. It's not just film, it's also food, fashion, tech, and lifestyle. McDonald's, Coca-Cola, Nike, Apple. These brands are global icons. They represent more than products. They symbolize the American dream. This isn't just capitalism, it's cultural colonization through consumption. While many embrace these symbols, they also erode local identities. Traditional foods are replaced, languages are diluted. Cultural pride can become cultural shame. This is the paradox of soft power. It charms, but it also overwhelms. Social media platforms like Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and TikTok, even when run from other countries, are largely shaped by American norms and algorithms. These platforms promote beauty standards based on Hollywood aesthetics, westernized activism models, English as the dominant language of influence, trends that often ignore or absorb local culture. Soft power isn't just what's sold, it's how we're seen and how we see ourselves. That's a quiet kind of control, one that doesn't need tanks or treaties. Here's where it gets really interesting. America's cultural exports are loved and hated simultaneously. People around the world watch American shows, wear American brands, listen to American music. But many are also deeply critical of US foreign policy, arrogance, and hypocrisy. There's an identity split: admiration for American creativity, innovation, and freedom of expression, resentment toward the moral superiority and cultural erasure that often tag along. The result, a global love-hate relationship, one that confuses diplomacy, complicates alliances, and breeds both fandom and fatigue. Cultural imperialism versus globalization. Now, critics often use the cultural imperialism to describe what happens when one culture, usually a dominant one, overtakes another through media and consumerism. Supporters call it globalization. But here's the difference. Globalization implies mutual exchange. Cultural imperialism implies one-sided dominance. When American values dominate without listening, adapting, or respecting, it's no longer just soft power, it's subtle coercion. And that can be just as damaging, especially to smaller or economically vulnerable nations. Resistance and pushback. Of course, this kind of influence doesn't go unchecked. Around the world, people push back. Countries like France impose language laws to resist English dominance. Cultural movements in Africa, Asia, and Latin America work to reclaim indigenous identity. Even American youth themselves have begun questioning and rejecting aspects of their own exported culture, especially toxic individualism and consumerism. The world is not passively consuming America, it's responding, challenging, and sometimes rejecting it outright. Here's the full circle irony. America's cultural soft power often continues the hero narrative, this idea of saving the world through freedom, opportunity, or the American dream. But who asked for that saving? When help means cultural domination, the hero complex isn't just about bombs and diplomacy, it's about branding and identity theft. So while soft power may look harmless, a song, a burger, a Netflix series, it's actually shaping hearts and minds on a massive scale. And when that power is used to reinforce dominance rather than invite dialogue, it stops being soft at all. In the next segment, we'll talk about the cost of all this, the consequences of playing hero globally and domestically. Stay with me. So far, we've explored how the American hero complex was born, how it sometimes mutates into bullying, and how American culture seduces the world even as it oversteps. But what happens when the cape rips? What are the consequences of believing you're the hero when others see you as the villain? Or worse, as an overbearing savior who leaves chaos in their wake? Let's take a sober look at the long-term price, both for America and for the world. Global instability as a legacy. Let's be clear, one of the most tragic legacies of American interventionism is destabilization. Iraq, invasion based on misinformation leads to power vacuums, civil war, and the birth of ISIS. Afghanistan, 20 years of occupation, only to watch the Taliban retake power within weeks of US withdrawal. Libya, after NATO-backed regime change, Libya descended into lawlessness, becoming a hub for human trafficking and civil war. Latin America, decades of US-supported coups and economic manipulation led to political instability, drug violence and mass migration. These are not just isolated failures, they're patterns. And they beg a painful question. Did the US export create chaos, or just recreate blowback and anti-American sentiment? Then comes blowback, the unintended consequences of imperial behavior. Terrorist groups explicitly cite US actions in the Middle East as motivation for attacks. Youth radicalization thrives in regions where drone strikes have killed civilians. Diplomatically, allies grow weary and adversaries become more emboldened. The more the US pushes the savior narrative, the more it alienates those who feel like pawns in its game. Polls from Pew Research and Gallup consistently show declining global trust in US leadership, especially after military interventions and economic sanctions. Let's not forget the cost at home. Veterans return from war with PTSD, only to face broken systems and inadequate support. Trillions of taxpayer dollars spent on wars, money that could have gone to education, healthcare, infrastructure. Mistrust in government rises when wars are started under false pretenses, e.g. Iraq's WMDs. Surveillance and militarization creep inward. Think of the Patriot Act, NSA spying, and the blurring lines between foreign war and domestic policing. The empire feeds itself, and the citizens end up paying the bill, not just in dollars, but in rights and lives. While America has the potential to lead, it often chooses force over diplomacy, domination over collaboration. Opportunities lost. Climate leadership, withdrawing from global pacts like the Paris Agreement until reversed. Peace building, ignoring UN resolutions and bypassing international law. Global health, cutting funding to WHO during a pandemic. Imagine a version of America that invests more in diplomacy, aid, education and development than in weapons and warfare. That version still influences the world, but through empathy, not ego. Historical amnesia. Learning the wrong lessons. A major challenge is America's amnesia, the unwillingness to acknowledge mistakes, much less learn from them. Each intervention is marketed as different from the last, even when it repeats the same strategic errors, ignoring regional complexities, assuming American values are universal, over-relying on military solutions. If you never admit you're the bully, you never stop swinging. What needs to change? 5 lessons for the future. Let's talk solutions. What can shift this trajectory? 1. Humility over hubris. Real leadership means listening, not lecturing. Acknowledge past mistakes. Stop assuming moral superiority. 2. Invest in soft diplomacy. Build global partnerships based on mutual respect, not manipulation. Send diplomats, not drones. 3. Support multilateralism. Work with, not around, international organizations like the UN, WHO, and ICC. No more playing by our own rules. 4. Focus on global equity, not global control. Use wealth and power to fight poverty, disease, and climate change, not just terrorism or communism. 5. Start at home. Heal the wounds within. Systemic racism, income inequality, political polarization, before trying to fix others. The world doesn't need another self-proclaimed savior. It needs allies. It needs collaborators. It needs grown-ups in the room. So here's where we land. The American hero complex has consequences, deep ones. And the longer we avoid that truth, the more harm we do, abroad and at home. But here's the hope. Narratives can be rewritten. Postures can change. And power, real power, can be exercised with restraint, respect, and reflection. In our final segment, we'll talk about what it really means to redefine America's place in the world. Not as a hero, and certainly not as a bully, but maybe as something better. Stick around. So here we are, standing at the edge of this question, the one we've been circling for the last 15 minutes or so. Is America a hero, or is it a bully? And maybe, just maybe, it's both. Or maybe it's neither. Maybe it's something else entirely. A country built on contradictions, soaring ideals and devastating realities, compassionate dreams and controlling actions. A nation that wants to be loved and admired, but too often chooses power over principle. Let's not forget, this country was founded on revolution, rejecting monarchy, demanding freedom. That same energy gave birth to powerful ideas, liberty, equality, democracy, but also to genocide, slavery, and imperial conquest. And this duality continues today, the dual nature of the myth. The American hero complex isn't just government propaganda. It's emotional, it's cultural, it's even personal. Many Americans genuinely believe this country wants to do good. That's not a lie, but it's not the whole truth either. The question we should be asking just, are we the hero? It's, whose story are we listening to? Because a hero in one country can look like a monster in another. A liberator on American television can be remembered as an occupier by families in Fallujah. And a well-meaning cultural export can feel like a bulldozer flattening a people's heritage. The danger of believing the myth unquestioningly. When a country believes it can do no wrong, that its values are automatically universal, it stops listening, it stops learning, and it becomes dangerous. Dangerous not only to others, but to itself. The moral decay doesn't start with the drone strike, it starts with the assumption of righteousness. That assumption lets everything else slide. It justifies lies, it rationalizes war, it ignores civilian deaths, and it shrinks the space for self-reflection. A moment of reckoning and opportunity. But here's the paradox. Recognizing these truths is not anti-American. It's deeply patriotic to want your country to live up to its ideals. We're at a crossroads, a real one. Globally, America's credibility is fraying. Domestically, its divisions are widening. And yet, the myth of heroism still plays like a well-worn film reel. But there's a different story we can choose. America doesn't have to be the hero or the bully. It can be the humble learner. It can be the ethical ally. It can be the reformed leader. It can lead not by fear or force, but by example, by healing its own wounds, honoring truth over image, and acting in solidarity, not supremacy. Power with accountability. Power isn't the problem. Unquestioned power is. America has incredible resources, innovation, and influence. But if it wants to shape the future, it must also look honestly at its past and take responsibility. So, hero or bully? That's not just a question for history books. It's a question for every citizen, every voter, every policymaker, every storyteller, because the stories we tell ourselves today shape the world we live in tomorrow. Thank you for joining me today on Cluster Fudge. If you felt uncomfortable during this episode, good. Growth starts there. If you felt challenged, lean into that. If you felt angry, ask yourself why. And if you felt hopeful, hold on to that, because we can write a new story, a better one. One where America doesn't just chase greatness, but defines it through humility, justice, and care. Until next time, I'm Alexandra, and remember, we don't grow by avoiding chaos. We grow by examining it. Stay safe, stay curious, and stay human. Thanks for listening to Cluster Fudge. I'm Alexandra. Until next time, keep questioning, keep learning, and keep breaking down the chaos.